wanted to start the session with a brief couple of minutes talking about public art, given my experience both as an artist who's had public art commissions, as well as someone now who actually oversees the commissions of all the public art in the city of San Francisco. The first slide I have here is actually just a philosophical slide. It's one of my favorite artists. You can see them. But what it says is surprise is the main thing in the work of art. It's Oscar Niemeyer, one of my idols. And I think that all of the artists here understand. I did both. I think most artists here understand that because all of your works end up being so engaging and resonating the way they do because of surprise.
Also, they should lower them.
And feedback.
Bring the mic down. Bring the mic down. Yeah, don't be in your jokes.
You can go in I actually was commissioned several years ago to draft and author the Master Public Arts Plan for downtown Yerba Buena District, which is the main gallery district housing SF MoMA, Yerba Buena, Contemporary Jewish Museum, soon the Mexican Museum, and all that area around Yerba Buena Gardens. And as part of that, I actually did a pretty long study, extensive study on the public art around the country that was successful as well as internationally, and tried to come up with some of the best qualities that I saw. And at least for civic art, the best qualities that I deduced were accessibility, and what that meant was both physical and conceptual, meaning not only accessible to people, to anyone from 5-year-old to 85-year-old, and people who are challenged with disabilities, but also conceptual. In terms of, I found that one of the biggest frustrations in the public is coming up to a piece of art that they don't understand, they don't get, and they don't know why a city would pay $3 million to have that blob in the middle of their park. And so in terms of conceptual, I really am talking about storytelling. Somehow there's some sort of story or narrative, whether it's abstract or literal, that the public can access and be delighted by. The second quality is identity and civic pride that reflects the community that you're in. The third is storytelling. The fourth is novelty. The fifth is some sort of engagement or interactivity. And by interactivity, I don't mean electronics. I mean being able to walk up to something and touch it, interact with it in terms of take pictures of it, take pictures of other people in it, have it become part of your memory. And then establishment of place of familiarity. And that, I think, is also incredibly important because many times that resonance comes from the fact that there's a relationship between the art that you make and we're excited. And the two together make this create a story. So civic art, has unique qualities in that it shapes public perception and public ownership of a space. I know all of you probably, or hopefully all of you, saw those amazing Black Rock Arts Foundation sculptures on the Embarcadero, the rocket ship, the dancing woman, and the Louise Bourgeois spider. And any of you who saw those, because of their scale and when they were sited, had this real pride in terms of this is our city, this is San Francisco, and here's a sculpture that I think really tells the personality of the city that I can identify with myself. And it gives the public a sense of ownership of their city. Secondly is the involvement of stakeholders and the community role as well as the artist role. I can't, particularly for civic art, I can't emphasize that enough. At the Arts Commission, of course, that's a huge process that we go through to make sure there's buy-in from the community in terms of, because we are funded by the taxpayers' money, they feel a direct ownership in terms of their role in deciding what that should be. And then, of course, there's process, which I know all of our wonderful guest artists here are going to talk about in terms of public process, city agency process, if it's on city land, whatever regulatory processes there are that are necessary for you to jump through all those hoops in order to get realized. And last, resource and funding, whether it's through legislation like the 1 or 2% that San Francisco gives for public art, public or private, city or city organizations, or national organizations, for example, national grants like Art Place or Art Town. And then lastly, I wanted to show this slide with these handouts that I have for everybody. These are the top 5 sources for resources for you to actually get grants for your public art. A couple of them I knew about, but then over time I got familiar with more of them because the original calls were usually from Americans for the Arts and callforentry.org, and recently, and NYFA source, and recently there have been more online resources that have discovered that this is a very rich resource to be able to reach artists to make and create and get funding and realize public art. I just wanted to speak briefly about each one. Americans for the Arts, the Public Art Network listserv. To be a member, you pay $50. What's really nice, though, is you get a regular listserv of several different listservs, including an education one, an administrator's one. This is the listserv where you actually see all the conversations of all the arts administrators and municipalities who commission public art, saying, hey, I'm looking for an artist that does theater. I'm looking for an artist that does welding. And they put those calls out into the ether for all the other public art administrators. And if you're an artist who belongs to this listserv, you immediately get basically a head start on applying and communicating directly with that person about doing a major piece of art. And I'm not talking about minor. Most of these public artworks are in excess of a couple $100,000, and some of them are like $1 million. So these are the arts administrator decision makers in all of the cities around the nation. So you see that conversation, and they put out calls, and they also troubleshoot. So for example, a typical question is, we have a metal sculpture that doesn't have a finish yet. Does anybody have any examples or tips for how we should finish it? So it's also this great how-to for public artists, because so much of public art has to necessarily be outdoors. Public artists.org is a very new listserv, but I find it's probably better than all of the other ones. It's sort of learned from them in terms of really tailoring the calls, so you know immediately how to skim how much money the call is, what it's going to require, whether you have to be a resident artist, whether it's a national call, whether it's international. Excellent resource. Callforentry.org was one of the originals. It's been around for like 20 years. I find that it's not as well curated. You know, it'll ask for people who want a painting juried show, and it's not about public art, but it does still have some usefulness for public artists. NYFA Source has also been around for 20 years, and even though it's New York Foundation for the Arts, it's actually an international resource, and it's of the 3 I would recommend spending your most time with. It would be Americans for the Arts, Public Artists, and NYFA, because what that does is it actually tailors a database that allows you to both look for commissions as well as grants. And grants not necessarily make public art, but just to make your art, no matter what it is. And it's international. And so it can have an international call to do some major public art installation in Barcelona. But it actually gives you the resources to be able to very quickly and in a detailed way tailor your search, and as well as even the timeline as to when you want to be able to do this. And last, UConn. Anyone here subscribe to UConn? Okay. One of the most valuable resources in terms of what's going in arts making right now. Thomas Cott is one of the biggest leaders in the arts, particularly in the national public arts. And he actually surveys every week all of the major digests and picks the best articles in terms of what's happening in that field. So, you know, it won't always talk about public art, but it will be talking about visual art and public art, theater arts. But he actually, and it's usually about a 5-minute read. So it's really great in that way, as for the weekly digest. And what it does is it gives, and you can just look at the subject header to know if it's something you're interested in reading about or not. But it also gives you an insider's view in terms of where art is moving in a certain direction in all of the fields, and it's free. So subscribe to UConn now. Okay, enough for me. Now I want to move on to our 4 luminaries here. The first person we'll be introducing is Kate Ron-Bush. She is a New York City-based artist who creates social commentary through sculpture, using themes and symbolism from history and mythology, geometry, and architecture. She utilizes welded and laser cut metal, acrylic, mirror, glass, and light to form enveloping allegorical environments in an effort to shape an awareness of our changing earth and evolving humanity. And she will be talking about delivering the perfect pitch, so let's all look.
Well, I'm going to give you a choice. Or do you want to hear the pitch that I gave to Burning Man first, or do you want to hear the explanation of how to get the perfect pitch?
The pitch
Pitch first. All right. Okay, the one that I think well, can you fast forward to Altered State? So, Altered State was a sculpture that I made for Burning Man in 2008. And the theme that year was the American Dream, a very contentious theme. And I thought, oh, American Dream, America, you know. And thinking back to, you know, we're really immigrants here. We're not really from here. And, you know, what were the dreams that were pushed aside to make way for our own? And so, of course, you turn to the native peoples of this continent, and so I wanted to create a sculpture that addressed that, but using cultural symbolism of the U.S. Capitol Dome and the shared symbol of the eagle, because we both have eagle symbolism in our culture. In the native peoples, it's an animal that represents the highest spiritual realms you could possibly reach, the connection to God. And for the United States, it's more of like this creature with talons, hegemony, and, you know, global rage and domination. So it's totally opposite. So I wanted to explore the language of the dichotomy there in that one bird within a sculpture that you could go inside and interact with. And so here we go. So you're gonna have to forgive me. I actually wrote an essay for this, so yes, I wrote an
For the
essay.
pitch?
I wrote an essay, of course.
Or for the pitch you did on this?
For this, of course, yeah. I don't mess around. Okay, here we go. So I sort of play. I love storytelling when I make my pitches, and I love to, as I say later, seduce the reader into imagining the experience of the art. Here we go. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Far off in the distance, you observe with dismay a symbol of government rule on the playa. The white Capitol dome of the U.S. Congress looms obstinately on the horizon. Yet there is an essential quality to its surface, and the classical, heavy Greek architecture seems to vibrate with strange and unfamiliar shapes. Upon your approach, the monolithic structure's solid walls dissolve, and mythical creatures evolve before your eyes. You discover the symbol of the United States has been fabricated of elaborately carved white steel and space. Its entire surface is inhabited by faces, feathers, hands, eyes, eagles, monsters, and humans morphing into birds. Everywhere your eye rests is rendered in the archetypal graphic style of Pacific Northwest Coast Indian imagery. Every inch of this iconoclastic structure tells a story of the illusion of power and the power of illusion. Entering inside one of the 10 eagle doorways is like stepping into a cage of white lace. The interior light-filled space vaults 3 stories overhead. Vaults 3 stories overhead, and a ladder of carved white swings descends from above. Together, these elements create what seems to suggest the set of an elaborate bird cage, placed ironically and symbolically within the framework of a colonialist political power symbol. Yet the repeated symbol of the eagle is the united symbol for both cultures, and for First Nations peoples, it is a creature that represents insight, the spirit world, and the quest for the higher self. To that purpose, you ascend the swings into a vaulted dome of hundreds of carved eagle feathers. As one climbs upward, every platform on the swing reveals the wisdom of a different Indian nation carved into the seas. This mythic structure is at its core a gathering space to ruminate on the origin of American civilization amidst the enduring power, dignity, and vision of its native peoples. This monolithic government building is altered in a union of opposite ideas. The symbolic cage is transformed into a carved temple of wisdom and transcendence, and has become an altered state. There you go. Very serious. So, and now for my analysis of how to deliver the perfect pitch. Okay. One of my favorite singers, Nina Simone, once said, "The duty of the artist is to reflect the times in which they live." To me, these words convey the importance of understanding the great role that art has played as a witness, a catalyst, and a shaper of our civilization. In fact, just 2 days ago, upon the opening of the new home of the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City, director Adam Weinberg stated, "Art is not just about art. Art is about life itself. If you are interested in history, if you're interested in your own time, you should come and look at art." For my own part, I have made sculptures that address myriad themes. Many of them directly inspired by Burning Man themes. They include art which addresses Native and American history, which I just spoke to you about, Hindu and Buddhist spiritual mythologies, technology versus ecological balance, human DNA, Fibonacci spirals, meditation, and self-empowerment. All good artwork serves as both a container for your ideas and a portal through which we can communicate and relate to one another and our world. Delivering the perfect pitch is not so much about giving a commercial sales pitch. It is understanding the larger framework of life into which you are weaving your creative story. It is about communicating clearly why your artwork is relevant, and is about showing how it elevates our human existence. The first requirement before communicating about your artwork is extremely obvious. Have an original idea worthy of your obsession, your energy, and your time. Yes, seems obvious. Falling in love with your idea is essential because the process of manifesting an original idea into reality is extremely hard work, as we all know. Tenacity and this love of your creation will see you through every manner of difficulty and empowers you to speak with genuine passion and conviction about your artwork. Conversely, not knowing what your artwork is about and then using random art speak words as a filler may only serve to alienate people because it is not relatable. If you are part of a team and the artist is brilliant but has not the desire or the presence to be able to communicate their ideas clearly, it is completely acceptable to have another person on the team act as the communicator of the idea. Okay, the second requirement, know your audience. If you're creating art for Burning Man, the proposal will be different than proposal to install the same art at a university or as a centerpiece for an ecotech company campus or a museum. Without changing the core meaning of your work, do your background homework and make the artwork's presence relatable to the cultural landscape in which it will exist. How will it elevate or inform their experience? So as you write a proposal, you must think about 4 things: context, content, style, and intention. Creativity is endless, but all artwork has context. Whether context is history or biology, mythology or science fiction, architecture or ecology, death, sex, or surrealism, we need to understand the backstory of your art's existence. Engage us with why this artwork is relevant to what has already been expressed and occurred. What physical symbols are you employing, and what does it mean in your context? Content. This is the meat of your idea, and it does not have to dive into the minutiae of, fabrication from the onset. Details can be added later. You do, however, have to paint a dynamic visual picture of what you are bringing into being. So describe it in relation to those that will be experiencing it for the very first time. Is it an object to behold? Or does it create a physical space of connection or interactivity? How is it illuminated, and does that enhance the personality of the artwork? If it is a process-driven artwork, how are people empowered by its creation? If it is an interactive artwork, how are people invited to participate, and how does the artwork evolve because of it? How might your audience evolve because of it? Style. The style of your proposal is your own personal expression. There's no right or wrong way, but it should be a genuine expression of your idea. It can be amusing or educational. It could ask rhetorical questions. It could use magical realism and even create its own mythology. But it should not be a dry recitation of facts and dimensions. Style is your voice. It is where the prose of your proposal meets the facts. For my own part, I always enjoy seducing the reader with the story of a person's first encounter with the artwork. My style seems to be equal parts storyteller, philosopher, activist, and spiritual guide. Your unique style is an opportunity to express your own voice and purpose as an artist, as a creative conduit of ideas. Lastly, intention. Intention directly relates to the purpose your art attempts to fulfill. It is a function of how you invite other people to understand, relate to, and hopefully also fall in love with your artwork based on shared ideas. Without intention, art has no teeth, no compass, no motivating force. How does the artwork question reality, expand the audience's horizons, educate, confound, delight, or bring people together? How does art attempt to inspire and open people's minds? Make no mistake, this artistic intention has nothing to do with the commercial sale of an idea. It is beyond it and above it. It occupies the part of art that has expressed the soul of civilization for centuries. Understanding and expressing intention is at the root of art that elevates. Intention is what gives art its power. It is the part of the artwork which expands consciousness and gives back to the human experience from which it originates. Art with intention is what makes human creative expression one of our defining and redeeming qualities as a species.
Kate, I think that was one of the most outstanding essays and presentations I've ever heard.
Oh my God.
No, really. I mean, it's like somebody who looks over hundreds and hundreds of proposals, and I totally understand why you're so successful in getting your grants. I'm wondering if it's possible if you can post your essay for all of us to share, because I think those tips are so incredibly important.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That would be
Yeah.
terrific.
nice.
Yeah, that would be terrific.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, now we're going on to our second speaker, Laura Kimpton. Laura is a mixed media conceptual artist and sculptor who focuses on social issues and philosophy through her art. She's been widely exhibited in museums and galleries across the nation with major shows in New York, San Francisco, LA, and Texas. She's best known for her monumental word series, one of my favorites, launched in 2009 at the Burning Man Festival. Being dyslexic, Laura designed the World Series to create a discussion about the power of words and how different minds interpret them. The words so far are mom, oink, love, ego, and believe.
One of the subjects I said I wanted to talk about was how right brain artists can live and work in the left brain art-run world. And which is kind of, my art is always about two subjects. It's either about that humans are not number one on earth, and that right brain intelligence isn't superior. And so, and it's very odd to grow up and be an artist, but then have to work and figure out how to live in the world of the artwork. I don't know if anybody's been over there today, but there's a big art fair over there, and there is no representation of Burning Man over there. And those two worlds need to figure out, especially in San Francisco, to come together. And I graduated from the San Francisco Art Institute in 1989, and recently I went to an event of the San Francisco Art Institute, and there wasn't one person from Burning Man but me there. So I'm here a little bit to talk about how to figure out being this crazy, weird artist who shows up without to talk about, and how.
Hey, I'm from the San Francisco Institute too.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I'm crazy.
So, but how to be this crazy artist who could come up with the idea of making the word ego 20 feet by 60 feet made out of 10,000 molds of trophies and religious relics, spray painted gold, and torch it. Can also figure out how to work in the gallery world of the way we're supposed to figure it out. And I have been in that world, and I have worked my way through that world, and I have to say that Burning Man saved me. And I'm at the point about going back into that world because most people don't know about me, is I every day get up and make collages. So I make two-dimensional small collages, big collages every single day. My sculptures for Burning Man now are built, or they always have been, are built by a crew. And they're right now built in Reno. So I envision the idea, I draw it in a really bad drawing that David Best has gotten mad at me for many times. And I put in the idea, and then people come to me and we build it. So I'm not exactly doing the steps in order to myself to build these big things. I'm making little art. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So how does one, my subject was, how does one work as a right-brain person in a left-brain world? And we have put our art in public places. Luckily, our first place was Reno, where Braff brought Celtic Forest, where we had 9 things on fire 3 times a week. So we had 3 steel trees, 20 to 30 feet tall, that projected flame by buttons. We had 3 moats of flaming books that were turned on, and we had a 16-foot steel book where you could turn the pages and push a button and the flame would go 50 feet in the air. And it was up for 6 months, and luckily Braff was in charge of making sure that all the paperwork was done right and all the crew was done right, and they were our first experience of being in public art. Right now, we have sold Love to a winery, and one of the things you had to work on with that, and the one thing you have to work on as an artist, is how not to give your soul and you away. And so we had to sign off that we wouldn't sell Love to any other winery or any other place in Sonoma. I probably wouldn't do that again today. So, and this year right now, Dream going to Burning Man it's been already purchased by the town of Arlington, Texas. Now I want to say that I picked every word, and every word has been important to me. Mom, it was the American Dream, but it was about Earth and Mom, and it was backwards, obviously. And the next word was oink, which, by the way, wasn't oink, it was the word in-okay. It was being in the state of in-okay. And I was a pig raiser at that time, and an alpha pig will oink to all of her pigs in the herd every 30 seconds to say, "Are you okay?" And they all oink in. So the alpha pig will go oink, and then everybody will go oink, 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 oink. And if one doesn't oink in, she'll go oink! So I'm someone who suffers from post-traumatic stress, so putting up oink was really being in a state of in-okay. Because what she's saying to her herd, "Are you okay, are you okay, are you okay, are you okay?" The next year I did Love, which I kind of thought was it was beautiful, but I also thought it was kind of obvious. But it was amazing how people took to it. and how lucky I have been about the photographs that got into magazines. And one of the reasons I realized that love gets so much publication, there's two reasons besides it being cute, but is one, it's horizontal. And publications like Horizontal Art, by the way, anybody can bill. And second, it's obvious what it says. You photograph art at Burning Man, you don't always can tell when you're printing what it was. The fourth word was ego. And ego I built because of the idea of humans thinking that they're number one on earth. And I also wanted to burn something out there. And people would come up to me and say, you can't burn it, it's too beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, what am I going to do, put this in my backyard? The point of it is to burn it. And then the next word I did was believe, and the reason I did believe was I'm a mom, and my daughter was 13 at the time, and you can't go forward and keep being a mom unless you get up every day and believe, and stay present. And even if I was going to be hit by a bus, I want to believe I'm not going to be hit by the bus at the moment I get hit by the bus. So being present and believing. And so this year, and then last year we did Pyramid of Flaming Love. And the reason why we did that is I wanted to bring back love because it was so popular. And then we now make our words in smaller words. And we've been lucky that people have been buying those. It supports our whole... I went from somebody who funded all my art at Burning Man to the art now being funded. It took 10 years. And a lot of money. I haven't made back all the money I put in, but a lot of money, and now it's being back. So when someone came to us and said, when you do the word dream, I would tell you that I would never ever do a word at Burning Man or do a word that didn't make it to my heart. But if you know me, first place, one, I love to sleep. And I have the best dreams. I woke up from an alarm because I landed from New Orleans Jazz Fest about 5 hours ago. And I woke up from an alarm and I was hanging out with Robert Redford. And it was more visual than what happened in New Orleans. I gotta tell you. It was just as clear. And then I also believe that you need truly, I've given this talk out of Burning Man 100 times, you need to dream what you want. And I remember the first year we did Celtic Forest. We had flaming trees, I had flaming modes, I let Bonfire Bob blow up methanol in my art piece. And I was trying to figure out how to visualize nobody getting hurt. How do you visualize that? So I said, I'll visualize seeing a place on the way home past Burlock that one of the factories passed that when we're driving home, I turned to my husband Jeff and laughed. And I visualize that every day, 30 times a day, going out to Celtic Forest, so that there's no way on the way home I would be laughing if someone got hurt. And we didn't have a stub toe. And I've done this every year, the same thing. I've laughed. It's changed the person I'm in the car with. But I've dreamed the fact of seeing that, and to this day, I'll knock on wood, Celtic Forest, Lord Kingdom, Jeff Schopper crew has never had any problem. We've never had one problem, except for Bob Hoffman's methanol. But that was a fun fire show. So this year, Dream is going Arlington, Texas, which, by the way, happens to be the home of the Cowboys Stadium, which I did not know that when we signed the contract. He didn't even pitch that it's 1 mile from Cowboy Stadium. So they're building a Dream Park. And so the whole town is going to have Dream logos, Dream everything, and so it's going to Burning Man and going directly to Arlington, Texas. But some of the lessons I will teach you from being an artist, last year I got flown to Shanghai, because they wanted to build a 30-foot love on the Shanghai River, which would have been great, which would have been fantastic. But when it really came down to what you have to think about with public art and building your art, when the amount of money they offered, which is, I think it was like $160,000, when it came down to how many times I would have to fly to Shanghai, it came down to me having the government own love, the Chinese government owning love. And when it came down to every time I had to fly, first place, they found me on Facebook. And they said to me, we'll fly you to Shanghai. I'm like, well, I'm not going to Shanghai alone. From somebody who found me on Facebook, even if you send me a first-class flight ticket, I am not going alone. So I had to go with somebody else because I'm not going to Shanghai by myself alone. So when it came down to, when we looked at the contract and we looked at everything, I would have lost money. Because how many times they expected me to fly there, how many times I would have to look at the piece, how big the piece would be, what it would cost, what they were willing to give, what they asked me to give up. So the one thing I would say is to be very, very careful in working in this left-brain world as doing public art. I've had gallerists, I do a gallery show every 2 years. In my last show, I said to the gallerist, I don't like galleries, sorry, I won't do a show. They always try to rip me off. And she showed me this beautiful space on Gary Street and said, oh, I'm not going to rip you off. The last thing I'm going to do is rip you off. So I said, okay, I'll do a solo show. I opened with 65 new pieces. I sold $45,000 on opening night to my sellers. She sold another $10,000 in the month. And then when the show came down, I only took down 10 pieces. She sat me down and told me I owed her $200.
Oh my God.
What?
And so what it came down to was one thing she wanted me to do, which don't ever do as an artist, is she wanted me to sign off that she owned me. She owned me. And I said, wait a second, I'm an artist who, when I drop my sweater on the ground, that's a piece of art. So do you own that? Do you own what I do out of Burning Man? Do you own, you can't own me. So I wouldn't let her do that, but a lot of galleries will ask for that, so be very careful with that. What I do now with my new show coming up is they can have the rights to own the art piece for the months that's up at the show and for the next 4 months. And they own that art piece, they don't own me. So this woman came at me and said I owed her $200. And what happened was when I hung my show, and I won't say her because she ended up paying me, so I promise not to say her name, but when I hung my show of 65 new pieces, I took 2 pieces that said they weren't for sale. They were too personal to me that I needed them for my life. And she minus the price that she had on those pieces to what she owed me.
Oh my God.
So I emailed her and told her that I was going to spend the rest of my life, if she didn't know how connected I was in San Francisco already, she better look it up. And I was going to spend the rest of my life talking her name down if she did not send me the money tomorrow. She sent me a $22,000 check the next day. The sad thing was that she had the $22,000 in her bank. So, I don't exactly have a point, but what I'm talking about is to be very careful what you're doing. Be very careful with your contracts. Don't sign any contracts that don't have lawyers with it. Be very careful, and I'm sure you've done this, that when you put an art piece to the public, that once you build it and hand it over, it's their responsibility. It's not yours. I had a situation where we were going to do the work. This is one of my best pieces. We had a 100%.
We're going to have to.
Yeah, go. Yeah,
Sorry. we want to keep this down a long time. And I know that we love you. But let's get it. And first of all, I want to say that this weekend, this day, is a start of the fine art world being in the same orbit as Burning Man. So I think that's fantastic that Tomas has gone through all this work to make sure that we're present here and have a stronger presence as the art market, because right now they do operate in separate orbits, which is too bad. Even in the Art Institute, where you think that would be the case.
Yeah, well, luckily it's overlapping now, they promise.
And her advice on galleries is right on. I've had the same personal experience with galleries as well. It was very disillusioning, which is one of the reasons I'm not a gallery now for the same reason. If you do go into that relationship, be very, very careful. So our next speaker is one of the most beloved champions of art in the Bay Area, Maria Jensen. She launched ArtPad SF at the Phoenix Hotel, which is an independent art fair with Chip Conley, in 2011, and it had a successful 3-year run. She's currently a member of the external relations team at SF MoMA, And she holds the position of Community Relations Public Partnerships, where she develops and implements public engagement strategies for the museum as it undergoes a 225,000 square foot extension. She's also on the launch committee for Sights Unseen, a public art project that activates several SF alleys. Let's get a hand for her.
Hi, good to see everyone here. I'm kind of unprepared too, so just to let you know kind of what got me on this particular path that I've been following on. I moved to San Francisco about 6 years ago from Los Angeles. And at the time, I felt that LA just did not have a very strong arts community. It was so focused on getting a particular celebrity to come to your show, your event, that the real, message, the real work behind the art was lost on the commercial aspect. And there wasn't any real community building happening. So we were packing up our house, and I realized we were moving to the Bay Area. My husband went back to Cal to get an interdisciplinary degree, and our son was 3 at the time, and I realized, I don't even know what I'm going to do. So I just thought about the things that I had been doing and what I was really interested in, which was community engagement, but art also as a kind of like a social experiment to gather people around work that artists were doing and to kind of, break down the walls. So then I decided, okay, going to San Francisco is kind of there's a different psychology in San Francisco than Los Angeles. LA is really much, you can say it's very superficial, it sounds cliche, but there's an aspect of truth in that. You can say that there, like I say, is a concern about celebrity. San Francisco seemed to be a place of collaboration where people were really trying to come together to do things. I also, at the time, had a love of art fairs, and yes, I did go to the Art Market art fair. I did leave rather quickly, and I'll explain to you why. Just having to come here was one, but there's other reasons I'll explain to you. So I had this love of art fairs, and moving to San Francisco, I'm kind of thinking of myself as kind of an outsider-y person, weirdo, whatever we're going to call it. And I started Googling, weird art entrepreneur ideas. Art ideas that are weird. Weird people doing business in San Francisco. Entrepreneurs in San Francisco who make the edgy art ideas for weirdos in San Francisco. And for some strange reason, Chip Conley's name popped up. And I said, Chip Conley, well, who is this guy? So I started Googling, and I go, okay, this guy's really cool. Like, check him out. He started a whole hotel chain, but he's also living his life out in the open. He was a Burning Man. I think if anyone would be open to hearing an art idea for bringing community together, it would probably be this guy. So I didn't know Chip Conley, and everyone in LA that I said, hey, I'm going to San Francisco, I want to do a project with this guy, everyone told me, you'll never meet him, he's too busy for you. And I heard that from every single person, but yet I kept developing the idea. I found out he owned the Phoenix Hotel, and I thought, now that is a movie place. Just imagine every room filled with art, the pool's activated, people are drinking, they're engaging. It's like a whole community. So I kept talking about the idea to all my LA friends. And of course, everyone's too important to meet everyone else because everyone else is also important too. So I think it was on kind of like the last day before I was leaving LA, I was sitting down having lunch with a friend. And I said, she says, what are you going to do near San Francisco? I said, I don't know, I got this crazy idea, I want to meet this cool guy. I started talking about the idea, started talking to the guy, and then I started mentioning, Phoenix Hotel, and she's like, wait a minute, Phoenix. Do you mean Chip Conley? And I was so shocked because she had just interviewed him for a magazine because he was opening a hotel down in Phoenix. And she's like, I'll connect you right away. And I was like, take that, Los Angeles. And then I, moved up here, sent a bunch of emails to Chip. Some were short, some were very, very, very long. And finally he agreed, to have a meeting. And I talked to him about this idea. And something like that had happened at the Phoenix before. I think it was in the 80s. Someone tried to launch an art fair, and it was successful, but then no one kind of did it anymore. So he's like, well, why do I need to do this? And why now? And I said, well, Chip, let's think about this. San Francisco is very small. Literally is 7 by 7. You have a lot of different communities here. You're part of several of them. I'm part of, at the time I was more part of the commercial art world. So it's like, maybe we need to think about a way of bringing these communities together in one place. So we could bring the Burning Man community, we could bring the commercial art world community, we could just bring people together. And it took like several months of these emails and back and forth phone calls, and I thought like, this is just not gonna happen. And so one day I was out with my son, Marcel, who's here biting his fingers in the back of the room. I know you're bored, sweetie, we'll be done soon. We were in a kids event, and, Marcel had to go use the bathroom. Sorry, I'm going to tell you. Not waiting till you're 18 to tell you embarrassing stories. They're starting now. Marcel's like, I gotta go pee. I'm like, oh, God. So I take him into an alley, and there's Marcel peeing. The phone rings, and I'm helping Marcel pee, and I look down and it says Chip Conley Cell, and yet I'm engaged. And another kid on a bike comes up, and this kid's like 9, he's going, you're not holding his penis right. And Chip hears this on her phone, and he's like, is this a bad time? I was like, no, Chip, this couldn't be a better time. And he goes, I thought about it, and I want to do this update with you. So we decided to launch ArtPad with the benefit for the Black Arts Foundation. So the interesting thing about that, Chip and I are super excited about it, but as I was telling commercial art dealers, it was a little bit of like, oh, well now that's different. You're bringing in something different into what we're kind of used to doing and who we're used to being around. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the idea. And so Chip and I were, we came up against it because frankly, and listening to Laura's conversation too, which I, definitely, it's disheartening to hear that. There are problems with the commercial art world, and there are problems just in general around perception. So when I think about my work at the museum, which is an interesting jump to go from working at ArtPad with Chip and the whole Burning Man crew and the few commercial art dealers that were just also right on the border, and then we pushed them off onto the edge of like exploring a whole different community, being more open-minded. This opportunity at SF MoMA came up, and I decided this is probably the next best thing for me to do because I can take that particular perspective of working with different communities into an institution that is not necessarily known for opening its doors and welcoming in the community. So that's why I'm at SF MoMA, and I don't know if I think they realized a year and a half in what they're really dealing with right now. Because, in my interview, I told the museum director, I said, I don't have an MFA, I'm not an academic. He said, what do you need all that stuff for? And I thought, well, that's interesting. This guy's going to think of hiring someone who's not from the academic side of things and not from the commercial side of things. And that was like a hint that inside those walls are people who do think about the different ways of doing things and different ways of engaging around art outside of the walls. And my job is largely, especially since we're without a building, is how to engage the broader community. And yes, I come up against, when I mention Burning Man, public art, I mean, I have my battles, but I just won a very significant battle. And that is the Sights Unseen project, which is a public art project because it's about activating alleys in the city. And a couple of the activations are taking place right around SF MoMA. So I thought, okay, I was asked to be on the launch committee. Now, I kind of had a little gray area, so I put myself on the launch committee as Maria Jensen. But then I also said, and add SF MoMA on the side of that. So when they start sending out their letters and things like that, all of a sudden it's like, oh, SF MoMA's involved, that's interesting. And it really, not to say that SF MoMA gave it, any kind of place of honor, but what I was trying to do is create tiny opportunities for the museum to have presence in things they're not the drivers of and they're not producing, but they need to support. And if there's anything I can tell you about the work that you're doing, how important it is, it's great that you want to do great things on the playa. I think it's fantastic. I went to Burning Man last year for my first time, and I ran into my campmate who didn't recognize me because I didn't have on the silver and all the other stuff. I was like, I don't think I know you. I'm like, pink silver. He goes, okay, now I know who you are. But I came back and had a debrief at the museum, and I was like, you know what? In terms of my partnership work, we need to find a way of partnering with different communities that are not doing exactly what we're doing, that maybe aesthetically are completely different, but just as a way of bringing these communities, together. So as you're thinking about your great proposals that you're going to do out in Playa, I also want you to think about how you can engage locally. Because right now there is pretty much a tale of two cities or a tale of four cities. You can dice it up as many ways as you want: art versus tech, tech versus art, commercial art versus Burning Man, this group versus that group. We're all speak similar languages, but we are identifying ourselves a little bit too narrowly. And I think we have to be very careful to not other people as much as we don't want to be otherized. So sometimes your projects might start in a language that you're using. So you don't want to, and also just where you're imagining it, because we're all engaged in city building. And I think the Playa is a fantastic city. I had the best time of my life out there, and I'll never forget it. But we also need that kind of energy here in the city as well. We need those visions here. We need to think of community engagement as community dreaming. So if you're going to think about how to get your work placed here, even if you create something beautiful in the Playa, I think eventually you'd like for these pieces to exist in the city as well, or be moved to the city. How do you create community building around that particular activity? So you want to think about your engagement level in cities and how you can be part of a civic dialogue around bringing communities together. And just very lastly, I know my time is up. I went to Miami to the art fairs in December, and I usually go to art fairs. I've been going, for like the past 15 years or so, and I used to really get into them, especially because they had free booze. And then I'd make my way to the art. But anyway, and I was joined by some members of the panel this year. What was interesting about this year in Miami, I really got tired of a certain commercial aspect. I felt that there was too much traffic, there's not enough engineering thinking in how to route people around, it's just certain basic things. So, and I was also concerned that I wasn't seeing any, commingling between what exists like in the Playa and what exists, in cities. And found an event at the Perez Art Museum. I saw some fire out of the corner of my eyes, and you thought that I saw the sighting of the Madonna. I was texting everyone, like, there's fire over here, you gotta come and see if there's fire in Miami during Art Basel. And the hope that what that shows us is that these things can happen around art fairs. There is a way to bring the Playa into the commercial reality. The sad reality is we can change the different ways we are thinking about capitalism, but capitalism, unfortunately, is a huge part of our everyday reality. So if that's the case, then you want to try to find ways of being a stakeholder in that reality. So it's about your work being placed in places that are of influence to other people. So you want to have an opportunity to maybe influence this horrible art dealer out there that's kind of ripping artists off. And that's the whole purpose of public art anyway, is let's create a dialogue. Let's sit down and talk about things. I'm done, I'm out.
That was wonderful, Maria. And I wanted to reiterate her point, and I actually think that Laura's a perfect example, that one of the ways to start bridging that gap and become a part of the other orbit that we don't want to other is to do exactly what Kate did, and that is have the excellence and the resonance of your art be recognized in the public realm, and then the gallerists will come to you to see if there's some way to translate into their orbit, but do so safely. And I thought, one quick question, I thought, Maria, you were going to say that the reason the person didn't recognize you on the fly was because you didn't have your clothes on. But no.
And my husband's here too, and he did not go to the Playa, so that it was silver.
So our very last speaker is David Shulman, who had created one of my all-time favorite pieces on the Embarcadero, and as well as my son's, who's 11. He is an installation artist and collaborator, working with and building community to create interactive, immersive, and engaging projects of all sizes. A co-founder of the 5 Ton Crane Arts Group, he's also an original member of Almost Scientific and an avid supporter of talented friends and colleagues. He's honed his fabrication skills in the tutelage of friends, expanding from basic welding to electrical and kinetic systems and project management. His recent group projects include the Ray Gun rocket ship and the Nautilus submarine armed car. He currently works as Vice President of Finance for Obscura Digital Incorporated. Let's give a hand.
Thanks, everybody. So in counterpoint to the eloquent words of my panel mates, I want to share a couple of stories that come at public art from a different perspective. So a couple of years ago now, and these are a little bit out of time in terms of order, but bear with me. A couple of years ago, my best friend and collaborator, Sean Orlando, and I applied for a national call, a public art contract up in Tacoma, Washington. And it was a site-specific installation artwork that they were looking for, national call. We submitted the initial packet, we made it through several preliminary rounds, and we made it to the final call where we actually had an interview in Tacoma. We stressed and fretted and worried over the presentation. We weren't entirely sure what we needed to cover, so we covered everything that we could think of in the context of a large-scale, site-specific piece of permanent public art. We showed up for the interview. There were almost 14 people, 13 or 14 people in the room. We had the City Arts Commission, the State Arts Commission, the County Arts Advisory Council, the County Transit Agency, which was financing the piece of art, two members of the Neighborhood Association and the Downtown Merchant Association, all of whom were stakeholders and had to sign off on the piece of art that was ultimately to be created. We went through the interview, which was roughly an hour and 15 minutes. And when we sat down, they gave us a list of questions. And we worked our way through a page and a half of questions. The questions ranged from, what kind of process do you undertake in developing an idea? Because we were not trying to sell them we were trying to sell them an existing piece. It was something we were going to create for that location. What's your process? What do you think about maintenance? Well, what about durability and safety, climbability? Have you thought about permitting? And are we going to light it or not? And how? Have you given any thought to the installation process? Because we forgot to tell you before, but this location sits on top of two 60-inch storm drains that are only a few feet below the ground. And so we can't put any heavy equipment on the ground above it. So have you given any thought to how we're going to install it? Given that, well, you just told us, so no, we haven't. The point of the story is we left that interview and we walked outside as serious and as straight-faced as we could be. As soon as we got around the corner, we looked at each other with the biggest grins on our faces, high fives all around, let's go get a beer and play some pinball and celebrate, because we nailed it. And what we learned is that, so Sean and I have been building together on the playa since 2004, and both of us with other people for a couple of years prior to that. The lesson that I want all of you to know is that the experiences that you've earned and layered through the mistakes made, the successes and the failures, you've really learned a lot that translates into the public realm. And the reality is that we went through that interview and we nailed every single question on the list in terms of how do we address permitting, how do we address maintenance, how do we address engineering. Do we have a collaborative process? Can we engage with the multitude of stakeholders that have an interest in this process? Hear their ideas, take it in, but not let it overwhelm our own creative process, and deliver something that's going to meet their needs and expectations that's still going to be representative of our art, and do it in a practical and pragmatic way that deals with the local conditions and so on. And so we came out of that feeling like it doesn't matter if they select us or not. We won. We've learned how to deal with a professional community in the straight world, and we've gained and developed that expertise and experience working on the playa, engaging with heavy equipment, engaging with the artery and the arts community, and answering the questions around wind load and wind shear, and can we put 40 people on there and will it stand up or will it fall down? And so even if you're thinking about building art just on the playa, just know that the experience that you're accumulating with every year, with every success and with every failure, it absolutely translates directly into bringing art into the broader world. And so as Kate and Laura and Maria have all spoken about, the passion and the idea of bringing these two communities together, or the Burning Man arts community into the wider world, the barrier is not on our side. We have, as a community, we have the experience, we have the depth of philosophy and thinking and conceptual ideas that back up the arts, and you have the practical, pragmatic skills and capabilities to interact with the public agencies, the permitting, and the broader community to make successful art installations in public.
That was so well said. Thank you so much.
Can I just say that we won that contract? And
Fantastic. And I guess I'm not surprised because, as David pointed out, you inherently, from having and growing and learning the capabilities of installing out of the playa, are hyper trained for the public realm, in the sense that you're subject to even more extreme conditions, working without power, working collaboratively, putting up something that has all of these complications in that environment. And public realm art, in comparison, is a piece of cake. Our panelists run over just a little bit, so we only have about 5 minutes, but I can take a couple of questions, and then after that, we actually can continue this conversation out in the conference area, the conference room, which is right by the main entrance, because we're all going to retire over there. Isn't that right, Tomas?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, conference center. We've got wine and food and dinner, and if you haven't picked up your badge yet, pick it up because that'll get you admission into the Desert Arts Preview.
Fantastic. So, any questions from the audience? Yes.
Have any of the artists, have you ever encountered a client that you've been working with that you decided to, like Arlington, Texas, you mentioned, was there a politics of someone that you decided to turn down working with them because of thinking,
Every single head nod.
I would say 1 in 8. I choose to work with. It's like Hollywood. The amount of emails or people asking to what you would want to do, or come to this festival, or bring to this place. I would say it's very rare that I say yes.
It must be such a thing to do. You don't want to, turn down someone publicly, right? I mean, it's sort of a sensitive subject, would you say?
Yeah.
I would say the biggest single thing out there is people that expect, well, you're an artist, so you'll do this for free, right?
Yeah.
You'll cover your cruise costs, and you'll
Less than free, it'll cost you money to do this.
Yeah, the biggest reason for turning down opportunities is because people don't assign the appropriate value to the effort and the work.
Or the liability insurance that you really need to do it. Like at one point I turned down the job because it was the library was the only person who's going to be standing up for me in a lawsuit if someone fell off my art. I'm like, I'm not too sure. I don't think the library has enough for that.
Yeah, I mean, definitely budgetary reasons for sure, because people have very unrealistic expectations of what it costs to install art and ship it and make it root. But also it's their contracts are ridiculous, and I've had a couple. Well, one in particular, I'm not going to mention it. But insisted that I sign this contract. There was a particular clause that said, "Thou shalt not work for," and this was a festival, not Burning Man. You may not work for any other electronic music festival, DJ, concert, any electronic music, anything without our lawyer's prior written consent for a period of 1 year following the signing of this contract. And I'm like, in exchange for what? Exactly. Zero. And you know, if they were going to say, in exchange for all this work that we're going to give you, because you won't be able to even take another job because I'm going to give you all this work, and yay. No. They just wanted to control me, and I will not be controlled. So, and so I said, yeah, shove it. And I actually, to much their dismay, told all of my other fellow artists that this was coming down the pipeline, and that didn't make a lot of friends in this festival, but I really don't care. Because it still stands, and I feel it is extremely unfair to box artists in and make them, they're not be able to work. This also happened again with another producer, and I have to say, they give you boilerplate contracts. It really is. I mean, some of them don't even know what they're giving you. They're like, I'm just going to take a stick of more, they don't even know. And this is a different, a different festival, which is a great festival because we worked it out. But they gave me a horrible, like the same concept that I just discussed, but it was you're not allowed to ever show this again anywhere within the electronic music festival. I'm like, this is an absolute insult. I became almost indignant. I'm like, how dare you give me this contract? I am not signing this. I'm totally insulted. And I'm like, if you think that I'm going to sign this, this is ridiculous. You should know better. I gave him this litany of whatever. And I'm like, let me tell you something. I'm going to write a contract, and I'm going to give you what I will sign. And then you guys think about it and get back to me. And I'm like, okay. So, but I don't think they really know that artists know how to stick up for themselves and read a contract. And so, yeah, we do, and surprise, it is extremely important to read all the documents and all that stuff. And if you don't understand it, of course, get a lawyer or ask fellow artists. So, and also stick up for each other and notify each other of these really unscrupulous festivals, galleries, what have you.
But thanks to Burning Man, I think you learn to weed it out, who's real and who's not. Like, we're bringing Love to Bottle Rocket, and they've been amazing. So you can have a great experience, and then you just figure it out as you go.
Yeah.
I think we actually are running out of time. Tomas is going. So we can continue this question. I did want to raise 2 points from what was just said, and 2 important points. And that is, first of all, as artists, we are valuable. The people who commission artists' work can't do it without us. And so it's up to you to protect yourself, and everything is negotiable. So if you get a contract that has a clause that you really disagree with, it doesn't mean you have to give up the entire ask. You can actually just say, yes, I would like to negotiate with you. I can probably complete it if we take out this clause. So everything is negotiable. And the second thing is take advantage of your networks, as Laura was saying. And that is that everybody probably has some experience with whoever is commissioning you to do the work. Put out a little inquiry and say, hey, has anybody ever done this for this agency before? What's your experience? And find out immediately if they're reliable or not, or someone you should actually seriously negotiate with. So I want to thank our esteemed panelists.